Oh, Danny,
Okay,
thank you for being here.
of course. It's a
So cool
pleasure.
to have you here. Danny is one of the most interesting people I know, especially because of the methodology he's used to kind of educate himself in something that is, I believe, going to blow up. It still hasn't, it's happening, and COVID is pushing it in this direction. And I think it's blown up. Um,
Yeah, I think it depends where a little bit.
yeah, okay, so it might have already blown up in some areas, but I still think that innovation as a subject matter is before is different from startups and technology because it's and also human-centered innovation. But
Mhm.
anyways, thank you for being here. I'm going to tell you a little bit about Danny and on this, and then I'll let you interrupt me when you get bored, Danny.
No, just go for it.
So, Danny he studied his bachelor's of science and mechanical engineering and technology in Wentworth Institute of Technology, and then did his master's degree in innovation, creativity, and leadership in Cass Business School in London. He's worked in Colgate, Palmolive, and Colgate, um, and he's also started a company, Z2A Gadgets, as well as volunteered in in a place called Safe Passage, which is a non-for-profit that helps kids in the garbage dumps of Guatemala to find an education. These are people who go to the garbage dumps to figure out an income or a way of eating, or it's pretty sad. And there's Safe Passage is an organization whose founder, I forget her name right now, maybe you could remind me, has pretty much dedicated her life and in a period of about 5 years created an organization to help these people and created a school that is uh, super advanced. They integrate with the community. They help out. There's a school for parents. Parents can help the school by volunteering to on different areas. There's a lot of volunteer work in general,
Mhm.
and just changed the life of many people. So Danny's also an ambassador and a volunteer there. Danny is a
Henley Denning is her name.
human-centered innovator. And what does that mean? And thank you for being here.
Oh, it's a pleasure. So, just quickly, her name is Hanley Denning, the founder of
Hanley
Safe,
Denning, yeah.
yeah, of Safe Passage, and yeah, I love their process. It's so interesting. Like one of the ways they actually make a difference is that they will give families that send their children their food um, as like kind of a reward for allowing their kids to go to school every day. So if they meet in a certain attendance level, then they'll be sent home with like a bag of rice and some beans. And it's a great, I would say, an innovative application of how to reward education in a place which doesn't have it, right? Or which lacks a higher level of education. So then going back to what you said, a human-centered innovator, I kind
Yeah.
of struggled. I honestly struggled after graduating from my master's degree. I've always had this kind of little struggle of where I fit in. But I've adopted the term human-centered innovator because I'm an avid believer in human-centered design and its applications for delivering innovation, and not just when you attach the design word. It's kind of a debate actually right now. But when you attach the design word, sometimes you lose the interest of certain people. Like, for example, in Guatemala, that the creative sciences kind of are less important or less, they don't have
Yeah.
as much merit in terms of if you say, oh, I have an MBA, someone will be like, oh, you're awesome. But someone who, actually one of the most successful entrepreneurs that I know in Guatemala doesn't have an MBA. He is a designer. He actually started his career as a graphic designer. And since then, he's, I don't know, made a lot of little companies. And his big one is a digital marketing firm that's actually won awards. He's spoken at Cannes
Yeah,
bias, you know.
can we mention him? Is he
I
anonymous or would
No,
you
he's
like?
not anonymous. His name is Aritz Bermudez.
Okay, okay,
Yeah, and he's a very interesting person. You could probably reach out to him. He'd probably be
definitely,
open to.
yes.
He's a Venezuelan who grew up in Guatemala.
So my question is actually that's the other very interesting thing. I've run into a few Venezuelans in Guatemala and a few other places, and I find them to be some of the most industrious and entrepreneurial leaders I've met. I think that the fact that they've had to face an entrepreneurial oblivion in Venezuela might have to do something with that. But stepping away from the political and going back, my question was, what is the debate? What is human-centered design as opposed to what? How do you contrast
Okay,
this? How do different?
so yeah, the contrast would be well, the debate that I'm trying to describe here. I maybe not be doing such a good job, but there's kind of many like schools of innovation, let's say, and some of the big ones you would think of, or at least here in the States where I'm right now, if you think of businesses that subcontract in like innovation, most of them have this very business heavy aspect to them. They're actually subproducts of large change management consulting firms. So there's this kind of like advantage or I want to say peso. There's like this weight that's given to them for being of a more business background, that they'll be able to create better innovation, while at the same time there's kind of design strategy firms or strategic design firms that offer innovation and kind of like this much more design oriented innovation. There's even positions called business designers, which if you actually break down the word, it becomes very interesting.
It's a very cool word. Yeah.
And it's actually what I aspire to be.
Okay.
But yeah, so I'm somewhere in between there. I have like you mentioned, most of my background is actually in a very non-technical place in operations at Colgate-Palmolive. I worked in a manufacturing plant, and I was basically tasked with continuous improvement. I think that's kind of where it ties into my desire to challenge the status quo and then try to innovate and stuff like that, and led me on this career path. But at the same time, it taught me kind of the backstage of business, of operations. So I have a little bit of an education in that through hands-on, but not a degree in business, right? And at the same time, I have a master's degree in innovation, creativity, and leadership, which was very human-centric, design heavy, but I wouldn't consider myself a designer, right? Though I am a somewhat aesthetic person, I do appreciate design a lot. I'm also not an educated designer. So that's where there's this strange space that I actually fit in and that people don't know about, which is kind of this intersection of business and design, without being exactly a specialist in either, but being able to create value in that intersection.
I find it really interesting to visualize. I mean, I'm still back. There's so much stuff here we should unload. I mean, there is the master's degree in innovation, creativity, and leadership. And then there was the word change management, which is really important, especially now where we have to adapt to various things that are changing. Not only has innovation accelerated the speed of change in most industries, but also we are now facing strategic changes and then environmental changes. And on top of that, we have political changes that are happening in the area. And on top of that, we have a global pandemic kind of running around. So there is a lot of change. And then I think there's some crisis happening in terms of information moving around. So there isn't just change happening. There is also a dose of or a bit of uncertainty in terms of what information is important and what information isn't. And I think all of that fits in the arena of leadership and innovation and creativity, because you have to adapt fast. Back to business design, I didn't really, I found it strange that you said, you reference aesthetics. And then I said, well, maybe I'm the one who's limited in terms of understanding it. When you say aesthetics, I'm thinking in terms of graphic design, and then maybe a little bit in terms of plastic arts, sculptures, things like that, maybe architecture. But when I first thought of business design, I really went into the abstract. I went into figuring out players and stakeholders and dynamics and then necessities and change, and then adding elegance to a solution. That's kind of the way I visualize that. Can you tell me a little bit more, maybe a case study from Cast University that you were particularly that comes to mind, that you think kind of helps me through this?
Yeah, no, yeah, I can definitely do that. But I'll take a step back real quick. When I mention aesthetics, it's because I like defining things first. So maybe we should just go there. But the reason I said design is because if I were to ask you what is design, what would be your response?
On purpose, a purposeful solution, something that is not clumsy, but you've actually thought about it before applying. Maybe open to change, maybe open it for optimization, but something is by design. It's not accidental. That's what comes to mind.
Yeah, that's much more aligned with what I believe, and I feel, well, given your background, I feel you'll also arrive there a little quicker. But at the same time, if you ask, I don't know, let's say that's thinking about Guatemala. I don't know, let's say a director of sales at some bank. If you would ask them what design is, what would you think they, like, putting yourself in their shoes, what do you think they would describe design as, or what would the word make them think about?
The next pieces of graphic advertising they're going to evaluate and go through before sending it to a newspaper or magazine.
Yeah, exactly. So that's what I was talking about. Most people link that design to that aesthetics, the creation of something beautiful. But it's so much more than that, in my opinion. And I go much more in line with what you said. Design to me is really the creation and planning of something, and then the execution of it. So that can be anything. That could be a new service, a new product, a new process. There's just so much that design can be applied to, and it tends to be, or like the whole design thinking methodology and stuff is very user centric. So design is something that it's a deliberate process to present the solution to a problem, right?
Can you elaborate a little bit on design thinking for an audience? Just a small summary. What is design thinking?
So design thinking is it's many things. It's a thought process, I would say, but the way we can describe it here is it's one of the models, or one of the popular models of innovation. And the term was coined by the Stanford design. And IDEO. But see, I don't remember the name exactly. But yes,
Norman Nielsen is.
Norman Nielsen has like his ideas of design thinking, but I think it's actually Stanford D School. So a part of their, it's actually part of their business. They don't actually have a design school, but part of their business school is called the D School. And it's where they apply design thinking to solve problems with their business students. So one of the lecturers there is actually, or one of the founders there is actually someone who also started this company called IDEO. And they're one of these big design strategy companies that I mentioned, one of the most well-known. that have people like business designers or UX designers and stuff like that solve large scale problems and deliver innovation. They're, an innovation consultancy. So, but just going over design thinking real quick, it's a 5-step framework for innovation, among other things. But the steps are empathize. So you empathize with the people that you're going to solve the problem for, right? Define. So understanding what their problems are, you define what it is. What is the real problem that we're trying to solve? So then you ideate. You try to come up with as many solutions or that you could come up with that could potentially solve that problem, and then converge on what you think has the most opportunity. So empathize, define, ideate, and then you prototype it. So you make a quick and inexpensive prototype. I'm trying to find another word, experiment.
MVP. Viable
MVP.
product, going into,
Yeah, and then you kind of do a limited release, or you test it on people. So then you bring people back in, actual users, and you test it on them. And it's not necessarily a linear process because you can jump if it's a simple problem or whatever. But the whole process is that it's based on the people. You come up with a solution that serves their purpose, and then you test it on them. See if they actually adopt it, and you learn and then continue, right? You go back. Maybe from test, you go back to ideate, it didn't work. Or maybe you go straight to prototype because you had another idea that was worth experimenting or prototyping. So that's kind of the design thinking framework. And it's very interesting. And I think if you unpack it a little bit, it's really good. It's just this user-centered approach where you have divergent and convergent thinking. So you think of ways to solve a problem that the users actually have. You come up with the most promising, and then you test it. And you can even link this back to like the lean methods and stuff like that. It's all they're all kind of have this similar thing, because I know there's people who are haters of design thinking. They say, that's just a fad. But if you just unpack it, you can see that there's kind of this common thought process of.
You said convergence and what was
divergent and convergent thinking.
Yeah.
So it's just coming up with many ideas, divergent thinking. Landing on the best ideas is convergent, right?
Okay.
Because
the optimal hybrid idea to test.
Or just one that seems like it could work, But the testing is what actually validates. So go ahead.
No, I was thinking. I was saying I feel that design thinking is yet another iteration of a problem-solving methodology that has been kind of institutionalized since the advent or the beginning of business management on one side, but also there has been, I think, there's always military uses in innovation that kind of also give you a framework to think about stuff. That there's been, medicine and psychology also kind of develop their own approaches to understanding stuff. And obviously maybe not the beginning, but another piece of theory that builds into that is a scientific method, So you're building hypotheses, you're testing, you're trying to measure results. If it's like if the prototype didn't work, then you go back to the drawing board. If the prototype it manifested some kind of proof in terms of what you're trying to validate, then you go towards an iteration process of optimization until you find your local maximum, and then you try a new thing. So
as someone with a background in engineering, I see the connection you draw, and I would say the big differentiator, in my opinion, would be that the scientific process is based on a hypothesis, which can be from nowhere, right? Which can be because you stumbled upon something and you want to check it out further. Yeah, exactly. Versus the user-centered approach, right? So having, sorry, I wanted to get there later, but having this desire to create value for a user, which drives the process, which drives in the end a very similar process in both design thinking or the scientific method. You know, coming up with a hypothesis, testing it, learning, going again. So I think that would be the big differentiator. It's just the user-centered aspect of it, or the human-centric aspect of it.
So let's land this on something like an example. Let's like and maybe contrast an example. Say, let's talk about how we invented a car and how we got to that, which is a very old innovation that doesn't have any theory on it. And then let's try a case study or something that is an example of design thinking and an example of a structured, more advanced application of what we understand of the science of innovation, after many years of being in this disruptive environment.
Yeah. Yeah. Right now that you asked me like that, there's so many that it's
cool. That's
hard.
awesome.
Well, yeah, but I'm trying to land on one that could be quick, easy, and sweet, and
yeah.
illustrate. But
sure, we can go through many. That's okay.
Yeah. But
I think part of learning something is iteration of concepts as well. But go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's this super cool one that just jumped out at me from. Too bad I can't draw. Maybe I can draw something on a piece of paper and show the screen. But because there's this funny thing that if you go backwards, sometimes people will kind of not understand how a human-centric approach could be awesome. But then...
Yeah.
Okay, so just give me a second. I'm doing a quick sketch here.
Go ahead. Do the sketch. No problem.
Sorry, I like sketching. I'm a big sketcher.
It's a great way of communicating. It helps.
So sorry, go ahead.
Well, my dad's an architect, so his job is to transmit really complex ideas using some standard symbolism and, drawing maps and plans, but also transmitting concepts,
Definitely.
And I've seen that evolve from sketches and paintings and artists using watercolors and special pens back in the 80s to what my brother is doing now, who also studied architecture, who's creating 3D renders that you can navigate using VR, so
of course.
Concept design has gone through that, and I find that fascinating.
Yeah.
So
I was just going to make a quick comment there, but sometimes you need to start with that pen and paper to get to that VR. So
Absolutely.
That's that minimum viable product, like you're saying, or that minimum, the easiest way to transfer an idea, like you're saying, is through that initial sketch that then can become something more complicated for someone who may not. It's a form of storytelling. For someone who doesn't have the same background or vision as you, it's a way to get them to see what you're seeing through effective tools, using technology to increment or to make better a human interaction. Sorry, it's just an opportunity to spit.
Yeah, and it's communication, which is one of the biggest differentiators we have. We can transmit millennia of experience through symbols to another person, and that makes us different from any of the other species living on this planet. So yeah, we go back to communication.
Yeah. So I'm going to show you these sketches.
Yeah.
They're really terrible, and I'm a very good sketcher. I'm a very good drawer, but sometimes you just don't need that detail, right? Sometimes just whatever comes out in 30 seconds is more than enough, and that's kind of another point I want to prove. But so here we go. I don't know if you can see this. Yeah, okay.
I'm seeing a little bit of pixelation on the camera, so but yeah, I can see two pulleys.
Okay, so it's a wheelbarrow. I don't know.
Oh, okay,
Look at this one. Can you see a wheelbarrow now?
I can see the wheel. Yeah. That's a wheelbarrow. I can see it, yeah.
This is a wheelbarrow created using design thinking. What would you think about this wheelbarrow if I don't tell you the context? Do you think it works? Is it terrible? Is it crazy? I don't know. I
feel like it could use its weight to uh, no, I've never thought of a wheelbarrow like that. It feels like it would be complicated to use it.
Yeah,
Um,
it seems like just based on simple physics, since I'm an engineer again, this is a long lever that you use so that you can put what it could potentially be a lot of weight that's inside your wheelbarrow
yeah,
on a rolling object, and you
yeah,
have the fulcrum to apply what's it called, enough force that you can lift a lot of weight and transport it easily, right? So that's the wheelbarrow we all know. This one, like you're saying, you don't have that lever, you don't have that fulcrum, right? So it would be more difficult to transport things in theory, right? But that's because I'm pulling this out of context. This is actually a very user accepted solution to a problem in construction. Well, a wheelbarrow would be also. But the problem here was that, well, I'll just go back to the beginning. So these designers went and empathized, through, like you said, observation, through design research, construction workers working in their natural environment, right?
hmm
And
hmm
observing as they did things that they had to do, their job. So one of the big problems they had, one of the big safety issues they had, is when they were working on height and they had to transport things along beams, a wheelbarrow became a dangerous object to use
Makes
because
sense.
there's such a large distance and you can't turn on place, etc. Right?
Yeah,
So they created this, what out of context can seem like a terrible solution to a problem, where if you use that same wheelbarrow on a beam, you can turn it around on its axis.
yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
now you're safe, because when you take your hand off this, when you stop using all your force to lift, it locks itself into place because that sits on the beam.
Yeah, I'm guessing there's even some kind of structure that kind of hugs the beam,
Yeah,
or the wheels hug the beam
I
or
think it
something.
was two tires that exactly kind of had the width of the beam and stuff like that, but they could rotate upon it.
hmm
So it's just a simple case study to illustrate how innovation can be counterintuitive, because when you look at it, you say, hey, that's almost a step back in the wheelbarrow. But when it's applied to the problem space in which the solution solves, you see that it adds value to the users.
It's a really good case study. It's a good example. I love super crunchers, I think it's, or super number crunchers. I forget the name, but it was a book. I don't know if we talked about this last podcast, but it's a book by the guy who wrote Freakonomics. I forget his name. And the general idea is that through the use of numbers, you can find the story, or you can find the variables or the levers that produce results in a counterintuitive way. For example, there's a one really good example, which is by understanding and kind of reading all of the data behind uh, what the variables were for wine production, and then doing a regression and correlating that with the wines that sold the best or sold for the highest price, you could find what the specific and when I say variables, I'm talking about humidity in the air, geographical region, acidity in the ground, uh, what the general stats were for the weather that year,
Mm-hmm.
and you could pretty much predict what the wine bottle would cost when it was being sold. Uh, Normally, you would hire a wine taster, professional wine taster, who would do a review on the wine, and then that would help the wine move, and more people would do reviews on the wine. That would kind of push the price to what it would sell for. But after that, only with the data, you would be able to predict this. Now, this is the way where data kind of led to intuition or led to experience results. Now, if you go, and now the next story is, I don't know if you're familiar with Moneyball, the movie.
Yeah, Moneyball.
So basically, Moneyball figured out a way using data to pick out players and place them in the right positions to maximize what they could pay for players.
Mm-hmm.
And they would pretty much pick players that weren't really that valuable in a perceived way. It was counterintuitive, but using data, they figured out that putting these players on these specific positions would produce a lot more runs or points. A lot more. What is it? Runs? I'm spacing out right now.
Yeah, runs.
So it's a really bad. I'm trying to get to the fact that our intuition is a lot of times good, but not necessarily. It can also block us. Both subjectivity and what we expect to see can sometimes block us from solutions, and especially now that we have so much disruption. Usually, our intuition is based on past experience and then genetics. We kind of evolved to think certain ways and figure out things in a way that was natural. And now that the environment is becoming less and less traditional and a lot more complex and more prone to change, we need to move away from intuition, or at least figure out a way to accompany intuition with methodology and scientific thinking, and I guess design thinking now. That's
there's actually a couple schools to thought in what you're saying, because there's kind of a structuralist approach to problem solving or even to innovation, which is that applying frameworks. And then there's the unstructured approach, which also, maybe you loosely base yourself upon a framework, but you're not limited by it, and where intuition can actually play a big part. There's defense in both, but I like the examples you use to illustrate how being more knowledgeable or being open-minded. So instead of taking that intuition and relying on it for instantly, as long as you're open-minded enough to challenge it, open-mindedness is a big part of innovation. So as long as you're open-minded enough to challenge your intuition and, like in Moneyball, take a risk that this hasn't been done before. This is on efficiency optimization, unlike we've seen before, generated by data. And that open-mindedness and flexibility to challenge an age-old game by placing new processes is completely a great innovative strategy and very structured. And actually, I think since you went there, I had planned to talk about this at some point, but at least in my mind, there's kind of 3 types of innovation. I don't know if you've heard of it, but there's what's called, there's so much literature that specifies these in different terms. And there's also literature that kind of says there's more types of innovation. But I think you can kind of, like the minimum amount that we can have that can encompass the rest would be what I would call, or in my master's degree, the way that was taught to us was a step, a stretch, and a leap in innovation. So if you use different terms, it could be, Clayton Christensen, the innovator's dilemma, he says efficiency-based innovation, sustaining innovation, and disruptive innovation. Or, you could also do kind of like a small or repeatable and custom. There's just like so many ways that you can say it. And I believe that what you were getting at with the data is a perfect example of that efficiency-based innovation. So that's what data gives us. Data gives us reliability. We have to be careful about letting reliability predict validity or the future, but it can tell us perfectly where we are. And then, as I would define innovation, which is the successful generation of value from like a creative idea. So a creative idea can also be data. Data didn't exist before, and creativity is using things that didn't exist before to solve problems, right?
That's an interesting point. Yeah, I like that. I've never seen. I've always thought of innovation and data-based, like intuition and data-based data-based thinking, or data-based problem solving or decision making, to be at odds with intuition, where you're saying no. You see, we intuitively got creative with data, and I like that.
Well, we didn't. The way I would say it, or data was innovative in its time, right? When we really started looking backwards to make educated guesses about the future, or educated guesses about people, because I believe it's more that you use data to understand processes and to understand kind of in the older school marketing strategy, like to understand the people that buy your, the segments or whatever that buy your product. So that
I guess in the terms of marketing, but I would say data goes back to scientific process in a way, and then it gets really big when you have a lot of information available to you. So it has to do with, I guess, industry, and I see statistically based quality control is a good one. Processes and engineering. I see data there. I also see data when you're looking for problems. I guess that I'm going back to statistical stuff.
Oh yeah.
But statistics, data is statistics. Data is a way of visualizing a ton of information in a way that's summarized in a way that it's such a way that it gives you a clue of what you're looking at. It tells you a story that you couldn't see otherwise.
Yes, and that's exactly what I was gonna say. I was gonna agree with you in that exact aspect. That data allows you to visualize and to tell a story, and then once you have that, you can make decisions. You can you can use leadership to onboard people to your plans for the future, etc. So data is very good at telling stories, and it tells you the story of what's happened until now. Repeatability and reliability. That's how I would say it. And it has its place, because using data, you make the most efficient organizations possible.
I agree. Yeah. You optimize. Well, it depends. I mean, I think you optimize new ideas. Like you get to that prototype that worked, from the example, or from our, how we started talking about this. Once you get to a product that works, the motor works because, the pistons are working, and now let's optimize that. And then you start using data, because then you start tweaking something.
Exactly.
It's almost like first you make the guitar go bang, and then you start tweaking it until it gets to that perfect pitch,
Yeah.
and I think data is a path to get there. It also is a great way of, I do optimization, web-based optimization. We try to tweak landing pages and tweak customer funnels, so we can maximize ROI. And when you're doing that, the first exploration is you're looking for big gaps in the customer funnel. So you have, people do a first click on the landing page that goes to a product selection and definition page, to give you an example, and then goes to a checkout page, and then you have the thank you page. And what you're looking for is that normally we'll have a graduate reduction of people going through these phases, right? So, a ton of people looked at the ad, and then some people, a little less, from 100 people that looked at the ad, 90 people clicked on it, and 80 people landed on the page, and 70 people, I'm being very linear here, but 70 people put in their information to download the PDF, and then 60 people clicked on the link on the call to action on the PDF, so they could buy the product with a discount. and then suddenly only 5 people bought the stuff. So something happened on the PDF part that didn't work. You found you're looking for a big gap using data. And it's something that you couldn't see otherwise. And a bunch of stuff that you're looking at on web-based environments and platforms is something you can't visualize. You can't be looking at 1,000 screens and seeing what everybody's doing.
Mhm.
You can do little case studies to understand what the story is around people, but then you need to use quantitative data to know where to look at and where problems are to understand what happened. So I kind of went out.
No. It's good. It can take us actually into the next type of innovation that I mentioned. So like that sustaining innovation, that stretch.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Because what you're talking about is actually the best way I would explain a sustaining innovation is the iPhone 6, the iPhone 7, iPhone 7, iPhone 8, and even sometimes a little bit bigger of a change. So like that iPhone 1 to the original iPhone to what it is now, sustaining innovation, how we got here.
But it's a progression of changes.
It's a progression of changes that's both led by a bit of intuition, by a bit of understanding, by qualitative research, by seeing what people value and chasing it, while also using data to optimize what you've seen so far. And it's that balance, right? And then, so where you went with that, with the website optimization, I think that's a very easy comparison to this type of innovation. Mm-hmm. Because if we say the website didn't exist prior to you starting to do all this work, then you made it. So that in itself, you could say is a disruptive innovation for the company because it didn't have a website. Mm-hmm. So now it has a website. It established a new norm, and you're going to make efficiency optimizations or efficiency-based innovations to make sure it works the best on your end, on the back end. At the same time, you're doing sustaining innovation to make sure that you're giving your users value in the website product that you've given them. If it's a sales funnel that they can find and buy what they want to buy, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, and then I don't know. Do you comments on that before we go into that last type of innovation?
I'm not quite sure I got the difference, to be honest. Okay, so the first one is a progression, right? So you're doing a series of steps, then you have gradual changes over time, right? And then you have this, yeah.
I would say the first one is continuous improvement of processes.
Okay. Yeah.
So of processes, doing things in a way which you hadn't before, normally based on like you're saying, on data. Though it can come from observation as well and stuff like that. But so that it's business as usual in companies.
Yeah.
So as a business grows, it has to do that efficiency-based optimization, which usually is resulting from doing things in creative new ways, which is what I define as innovation. So saying, we used to go from point A to point C through point B, right? But we don't need to do that because we see in our data that we can do it this way. It's easier. Or there's a new technology now that we can use to do that.
Okay.
So that's the first level. And then the second level, I'd say, goes a little more into that external value or that user value. So instead of just optimizing your interior processes, which normally will give a return on value to the users through kind of like price cuts and stuff like that, the real differentiator, at least in my opinion, in this step, in the second one, in the sustaining innovation, is that it's kind of like trend following, right? So like, or a vision of what people will want next. And normally that can't be achieved just from data. It can help you in a flow essence, like in this example with the website, help them flow through their journey a little better, and give them that value. I don't know if
let me give it back to you and tell me if I got it. So efficiency-based innovation, yeah, perfect. So we're doing this way now, and if we change this and this, we're going to use less resources to get where we want, or we're going to have more sales because of this tweak here. We're looking for efficiencies in a process that we already understand, right? We're tweaking it. Mm-hmm. Whereas the other thing that we're talking about is, hey, we've got this new idea because we think the market right now doesn't wants a flashlight in their cell phone. So let's add a flashlight in the cell phone. Let's see what happens. That would be the next step, right?
Yeah.
So it's like a big change in a process that is based kind of in what we think people want, and maybe it's becoming a fad, and maybe the competition is trying it out, or this weird prototype that we saw in this innovation place, and we're going to try it on our own product, which is a little change. It's a bolder change on a process that we're already familiar with. And I'm guessing the next one is going to be like this big change, right? Like the thing that has a huge amount of efficiency, and we need early adopters. And please explain it. And then I have my own thoughts, and let's start the debate there.
The way I would define it simply is it establishes a new normal, something that didn't exist before, right? So
computer.
Yeah. If you want to, I mean, microprocessors. I don't know if you've seen like the whole evolution of how they work.
Picture of a gigantic 5 megabyte computer. This gigantic 5 people are carrying it, and there's a lift and a forklift trying to push this into a thing. This was IBM in 1960 something, right? Yeah. But I know that computers and computational thinking start out pretty much in the Renaissance. We have people trying to figure out how to, these really complex machines that carry out numbers and are essentially primitive calculators, that automate certain cognitive processes.
Yeah.
But what are you trying to tell me with the history of
No, I was just going to say with microchips in the 90s, there was this whole kind of boom, and I think it illustrates this well at the same time. The efficiency-based innovation was that they would be able to cram out of the same components more storage space, right? Or more processing power.
Moore's law,
Yeah. The sustaining innovation was changing the size of the microchip, making it a little smaller, or making something with the same amount of capacity, but in a smaller size, right? And then that disruptive innovation was applying a whole new, not used material. So I think silicon, right? To make a completely different fork in what we went. So that then made it possible not just to make computers, but to make smartphones. Because so it's that it was, and that you can't do by data, alone, because data will tell you people want it smaller, people want it faster, people want it more capacity. But no one tells you that data doesn't tell you that there's a different way to do it. That instead of you made this is how it works now. That doesn't mean that that's what it's going to work like in the future. Maybe something else can do the job of that. Maybe it lives right now. Maybe it exists and it's used in a different field. But you can apply, I don't know, a material to this, and now it becomes something completely different.
So there are discoveries that change the game as well. Like, there's this discovery of the use of silicon on microchips that changed the game. Or there was what about things like the invention of the mouse? I'm going back to Silicon Wars or something, the use of the mouse, or the concept of a personal computer, or the concept of spreadsheets, and a tool that is completely digital, and how this is being propagated. Like one big game changer I see right now, and I was looking at it yesterday, and people had talked about it before, and I never really got it, was edX edX.org. You can get a Stanford education or something like that. I mean, maybe not it is not the same experience as going to an Ivy League and studying with the professor right there and having these interesting conversations in person. But the fact that I can go see a podcast or subscribe for a free introductory class that is made by Stanford teachers and that has a process and is transmitting this, and not just me, but millions of people suddenly are being educated at the same time on these new technologies.
Yeah.
Everything happening at the same time. We're in the middle of a gigantic, huge disruption right now, and which is so that's what I think that last level is. We don't know what the outcome is going to be. We're just applying new discoveries and technologies and method. This is like I think there should be a fourth level for this, because this is close to changing humanity,
But that change in humanity will establish a new norm. So there's no fourth level, in my opinion, because that third level, that disruptive innovation, changes everything. So now everything is different. And now we're going to have efficiency-based innovation and sustaining innovation based on that change, right?
Okay. Yeah.
So you're not only going to use, what is that website called? I know there's so many. Now, just, Coursera, Khan Academy, you can learn to do things you could never do before. And like you mentioned, or MIT open course, whatever.
Yeah.
You can attend these lectures at Ivy League
or
schools.
just YouTube. A good curation of your YouTube channels is pretty amazing.
That kind of pulls into this whole other field of innovation, which is kind of like the social and systemic innovation. The systems thinking. You apply systems. So the educational system and the work systems are intertwined right now, and kind of that disruption, you're starting to see it, I think, more in design fields and programming fields, the more innovative fields, that there's a systemic issue that if you don't have, this paper that says I graduated from this school, you can't get a job. And that's based on so many different kind of issues in different industries that overlap, and that create or establish this norm. And it's hard to change one without changing the others, right? So because someone can now get that education, it could be a genius somewhere in maybe an underdeveloped country without the network that they would require to be able to show their skills and land a new job and change things. But
change a country.
But since those systems exist and they affect each other, it's hard to make changes. It's hard to innovate those spaces. So like I was mentioning, tech fields now, as long as you can prove you can code, it's possible to get into big tech companies and make a lot of money, even though you don't have a formal education. And it's the same in design now, in UX, especially UX UI, that if you show that you understand the concepts, that you have the ability to design for user interaction, then it's easier for these people to get jobs. It's still not easy. It's not easy for anyone, but it's a possibility now.
I'm gonna shoot through some, and this is the end of innovation, and let's talk about leadership and creativity, and maybe go to leadership after this, because I think creativity is gonna be implicit, but just innovation. Here are some game changers I put on our list, and I just looked for it as you were speaking, and then you tell me what you think about these. But the first concept is drones are cheaper than highways. Off-grid renewable energy sources are cheaper than super electric grids or gas lines. So when we think about, we no longer need huge infrastructure because technology has gotten so small that we can operate it on an individual level. So think about the mainframe computers that had different, I forget the name, portals where you would interact with this one computer, right? Which is kind of already happening again, but versus the personal computer where everybody, it got cheap enough for everybody to start using their own innovation in a computer and started storing information, doing complex calculations, and now history. So that's one big one. And then from this, think about drones, not just flying really cool flying quadcopters that you can move around with your, but think about construction, think about data, think about health, think about fire extinguishing, and imagine, and I think we're getting close to that. That there's going to be no more need for highways, because we don't need to build them, because there's no wheels anymore. So this is a huge piece of disruption right there. Now let's think about preventive health and big data. We have enough information for people to pretty much go up to about getting very old before they actually have an incurable disease. Pretty much every research doctor out there is now feeding a global body of information that is then being retaught to doctors who are being, every year are being actualized. And then you see, it's kind of sad too, because I know that if you go to a specialized clinic, say in New York, and you find a good doctor who's specialized on what your problem is, he's going to have a completely new innovative solution than if you go to the local health center, say in Huehuetenango, Guatemala. Your chances of dying are a lot higher, and it really is changing that sad reality is just 2 hours worth of YouTubing the right videos. Maybe not YouTubing the right videos. Maybe there's a certified course online.
Yeah, that can be the access to information, stuff like that. Yeah, that big data. It's a weird one though. It's like, how is that saying in English? Una espada de filo. No, it's
it's a double-sided sword.
Double-sided sword, because there's ethical implications to all the big data that you can use. Where the person now becomes the product, and then there's a big discussion there. But then at the same time, the other argument, like you're saying, is through big data and through mass information, someone in a remote area has access to newer processes that could potentially save lives. So yeah, it's a big one.
Here's another one: 3D printing. Now I could pretty much, usually economics of scale would define what could be built and where things would be built. You'd have large factories, and you'd centralize these gigantic cargo ships to move stuff to a storage facility that then would, there was a huge investment for a factory, and then the factory could compete because they had all of these economics of scale in their favor. Yeah, and then, anybody who wanted to compete against them, say Toyota versus Maserati. Maserati is it's still a factory, but it's made by 20 people, and they produce like 3 cars a month. But the only way they could compete was becoming extremely famous. There was some sort of economics of scale, even in marketing, to get there. Now, think about the future. We could now download a blueprint that could be interpreted by a series of printers that could build a drone and could also build a breathing machine, or another complex machine that would usually take a factory and a bunch of engineers to pull together. I'm going back to the metaphor of you first need a printer can now print a bunch of materials that you'd require gigantic machinery to print before. A magazine require this. Now you can just print it out. If you transpolate that to 3D printing, you'd now, I think that pretty soon you could print your computer and your microphone and your cell phone.
Yeah.
And have that work, and as more collective innovative engineers start creating blueprints and selling those and having printers to print that out, you kind of go to the Jetsons era, where you could pretty much print out any food or anything you wanted from this magical machine.
Yeah,
I think
like Star Trek, they replicate food, which is something similar. This is a big one. And the reason I say it is because you have to, a systems thinking lens can be applied to this thing, because yes, you're completely right. The potential for changing everything about how the world operates and challenging supply chains and big businesses, the potential is incredible. But at the same time, if you look at it in a systemic point of view, what about how are people going to live, the jobs that all that produces, and so then there's this give and take and not even that I'm defending the jobs or anything like that, but at the same time, the adoption, right? Someone might be afraid of it because they don't see the value, or the value hasn't been communicated to them in a good way, because they can see, how am I going to sustain myself, or how is my life going to look like when everything is now so simply at reach. So yeah, I think there's huge applications to 3D printing, and it's probably something that's going to change a lot.
Yeah.
I think the systemic issues have caused it to not be so innovative so quickly, because the whole, open source aspect of it scares people.
I think we're still. I think we just don't have the oversight to understand how this is changing. I think that once a company, the efficiencies will drive the technology forward. I especially like a gigantic 3D printer that builds houses.
Yeah.
Builds 3 houses a day, and it's operated by 2 guys. I mean, just think about that in the hands of somebody who wants to make money fast because they're emerging from a global crisis. Like now,
Definitely.
This is going to happen, man. I'll just shoot one more, and then we'll move to leadership.
Sorry, just a quick rebuttal. Because I believe in, again, from that human-centric side, I'm all about value. So I would not go against what you just said with the technology will drive the thing, but challenge it in a way that it could, but only if value can be extracted. Because how many new materials are created all the time, that then die, or that don't have practical applications, that don't add value to our lives, so then they become obsolete. And I think there's this whole thing that I do believe in 3D printing, and I do believe in the applications it can. So I don't think this is a great example, but I just wanted to make a comment on that comment that you had, that the technology will drive the market, because it doesn't necessarily do that. And that was the point of creativity and innovation that I wanted to touch upon, but we can touch upon right now.
Okay, no, I think that what drives the market is efficiency, because of the natural competitive aspect of the market. So if I can if a country can manage its massive transportation on an infrastructure that is less expensive, it would probably move that way. I think I went on the wrong example here. Let me go back. Okay. Let's see. Let me think of something that it really is. The adoption of technology is driven by the efficiencies it brings, and we're talking about 3D printing. So let me give you a case. Let me think about it. Let's say I have a piece of land in a place that needs residential housing, and I am an innovator, and I have the engineering background to kind of put together, research and put together a 3D printer that builds really cheap houses, right? And the competition is also building on this residential area, and they're building the traditional way. So they have to hire a lot more people, and they build in a lot less time. So there's two expenses here. The first one is the cost of building a house, and the other one is the cost of money over time. You're going to be, because my printer is more efficient. Efficiency is driving the competition, or it's driving me to put these. So I sell houses at half the cost and in half the time. Pretty soon, everybody's going to be doing the same because you can't beat that. That's the way I see it from a free market competitive point of view.
No,
if
and
you manage to apply it, yeah.
No, and I completely understand that. But then I would challenge that again from
Please.
a user-centered approach. What if, because you didn't give me the background, so I found the loophole. What if that residential area
Debate is also
luxury over a cheap price? What if it's a highly affluent neighborhood? So that's why I think the technology fits the space, and if it creates the value that people believe in, then it creates a market, because you can have this incredible technology without a market. And I think an example would be the Google glasses that came out, a few and then died.
Yeah. Okay. That's a good example.
And I think it's a good example because of two things. One, I believe that they're going to come back. It was the wrong time.
Yeah.
And I believe, like you say, economics of scale, it was a product that was too expensive and didn't add enough value to be adopted. So maybe now, using economics of scale and everything, now that other companies start to invest in that technology, or that technology becomes cheaper and easier to mass produce and stuff like that, maybe it'll form a different market. But at the same time, it's the value that's added, because in that case, it's like the Google Glass was a direct competitor to, or not direct, but an indirect competitor to your phone. And what did people value more at the time was the phone,
Yeah, and now they're moving to voice, by the way.
Sorry?
As a UI. The phone was an innovative way of interacting with a computer and with the world, right?
Yes, definitely.
And it had a phone built in it. And right now, Alexa is another test of that. You're interacting with the world of information via voice, and you're automating stuff and you're using internet. But okay, I think it's a valid point.
I think both points are very have a lot of merit to them, and I think they just should not be overlooked and always thought in, involved, because how they mention, there's this famous saying like "innovate or die." Companies either innovate or they die.
Innovate or die. Yeah, I heard innovate or die. Like all innovators will die.
No, innovate or die, right? But at the same time, an innovation doesn't have to be technological. It can be value. It can even be a step back. There's
like slow food movement.
Yeah, like slow food movement, or I can even use the tech one right now because I read about it. I was interviewing at a company here, a large tech company, and they recently their like main source of income is artificial intelligence and how it applies to the financial world. And they just recently, a couple of years ago, they could argumentably have taken a step back in terms of their design, because they brought humans back into the interaction.
Okay, yeah.
But at the same time, that was innovative because their competitors weren't doing it. And it brought back customers that had left because because their transactions were more complicated than the AI system could account for in an emotional level, because it was personal issues in the small scale, not large scale. But when you put individuals together, you create a large thing. So by taking a step back and bringing people back into certain transactions, or certain interactions, they were able to expand their market again. So this is a very business example, but it just shows that innovation can be a step back too, as long as it adds value.
It's a rebel's game. Innovation, it's a rebel's game. It is somebody who's questioning the status quo. It's somebody who's saying we can do this better. And I think that also reveals a bigger complaint, which is we're not okay yet. There's something better out there, and this is not okay.
Something better.
Yeah, but what? There's I don't know if you read The Monk Who Sold His Ferrari or something.
I think I've heard of it, but no, I have not read it.
I think the moral of the story is, and please, if it's not, let me know on the comments if anybody listens to this up to this part of the podcast. I'm really having a good time though, so thank you for
just the conversation
being here.
It's great, yeah.
The point is sometimes we kind of do a 360 in terms of what we're trying to do, and then we get the job to make the money, to be at peace under it. The story of the Buddhist monk is this rich guy goes to talk to a guy who's poor in the fields. He goes out in the country, and there's this poor guy who's just staring out at the sea or under a tree or something. He's just resting, and the guy's like, you know what? If you did this and that, if you studied a bit and you got a job, then you could probably make some money. And if you could make some money, you could buy a house. And he kind of goes all the way and interact in society and make some investments, and then you could retire, and then you could. And why would I retire? I think the guy's questioning him. Why would I study? Because you could get a job. And why would you get a job? Because I could get some money. And why would you get some money? Because I want to retire. And what would you do when you retire? I'd sit down below a tree and kind of do nothing. You go back. So what I'm trying to say is maybe, and this is kind of this is an idea I've been thinking about, which is maybe we were okay before we started the first step towards innovation, the tree of knowledge, the whole Garden of Eden thing, which is, we started questioning our environment and how well we were adapted to it. And then we started changing the environment, which created more needs, which we tended to, which created more needs, which we tended to. And then eventually we might just go full circle and we realize we don't really need anything except maybe innovating in the way we understand ourselves and our environment.
Yeah.
And that's kind of a Buddhist position where we just don't need anything. We're just fine.
No,
existential.
Yeah. And I can provide a very easy example of that. And in my the graduating class for my master's degree of mine and a couple years before, I met a lot of them. And there's kind of there was 3 routes that these people took. One is a lot of them started their own companies. 2, a lot went into very, very innovative and technological fields. And then the third, people took a step back. A lot of people, instead of going into tech, instead of going into stuff, they went into themselves. One of my peers moved into a Buddhist, I don't want to say commune, but he kind of realized that that's more what he wanted, and he went into that space. Some went into pursuing a creative outlet fully, so like music or something, the art, because that's what filled them. The innovation. That was kind of in the other aspect. It was the leadership part of innovation and the whole ethics that we went into. But part of the argument was that a lot of us found ourselves during the master's degree because of the kind of things that would make us do. And then it made you really question what value is, right? Because what do you have? What what do people value, and then so it's what do people value in a business setting, right? And then what do you value as a personal setting, and how is that going to cause you to change or innovate your life, right? Apply creativity to your life. Apply these lessons to your life. And that could be taking a step back or towards tech, or towards innovation or whatever. And it's, in the end, for us, it was, what is the value that you place in life? Where is that? So that's a very interesting argument that you brought. I just like that in my master's degree and through education, there was a way to kind of support it.
It is philosophical in the end. Why are we trying to change things? Where are we headed, and why do we want this? Value in the end is a human abstraction. That is pretty cool. And what about the creation of ideas? Let's move into leadership. I have, and I think you said something about Guatemala, and I think we're changing in certain areas, but not so much in others. I recently was in looking at a possible job in a TV company, and there were so many things there that made me cringe. I was really happy I got another job that same day, so which hadn't really happened in a few months, but I was really cringing because I'd been working in a lot of very innovative spaces, both because I do web development and so I kind of create new ideas and get the customers' perception of what they want, and then I try to solve that. And I've been doing some really interesting projects. Moving to this company where, oh boy, I mean, even just imagine an inbound marketing plan, which is what I was thinking, versus a cold calling institutional plan, which is what they were expecting. It was just really, really hard to try to transmit some ideas, like maybe working less hours but being more motivated is a lot better than working a ton of hours and being super strict, things like that. So I kind of got lost in my thoughts here, but I was trying to go to leadership.
Yeah. No, I think I think I know exactly where you're going, and a very easy way that I think we can define what you're talking about there is there's this kind of, it's like the manager or the leadership dilemma, right? Management versus leadership, and there's kind of this old school thought where management is just telling people what to do, and and then making the best of what you have for the business, right? So it's not, I don't know, that's at least how I would define management. And I remember once just doodling, I kind of drew something that some of my peers in the master's degree liked and reacted to positively. So I drew like a rowboat that was sinking, and there was a manager, and he had a bucket, and there was a bunch of people with buckets, and they were bucketing water out of the boat while two people were still rowing, and they were going, right? And then in the same little doodle, I put a little life raft, an inflatable life raft in the boat that said leadership, because if he would evaluate differently and see what everyone values, maybe it's inflating that life raft, everyone getting on the life raft, and not bucketing.
Letting the boat sink, and
exactly.
then rescuing your talent. And I can see that.
So,
it is. Again, it's playing with your intuition. That idea, it kind of had me trailing and figuring out why. Yeah, of course, they're on a boat. All they have to do is stay above water, and everybody is kind of killing themselves to keep that gigantic piece of metal afloat. When what you really need to do is just inflate that.
Yeah. So for me, in my mind, when I drew it, it's because a leader can take a different direction instead of just just following, because in the end, a manager is managed, right? And is managed by something, either by objectives or by someone else or whatever. And sometimes you need that. That's how you make a super efficient company. Like let's say Walmart. Walmart is known, sorry to use them as a like actual example like that, but Walmart is known for having a somewhat hectic and very hierarchical management structure within the company.
Okay.
And almost, it's almost
so.
considered unhealthy. Yeah, it's almost considered unhealthy, the level of kind of control that they have. But at the same time, Walmart is one of the companies with the most, I would say it is the company with the most effective or productive supply chain in the world. And that's why they can offer better prices than anyone else, because they have a perfectly working and tuned machine. So, and that was achieved by pure management of assets and of people. But at the same time, Walmart was very innovative when it put its supply chain in place. And it may be somewhat innovative, I guess. I wouldn't consider it innovative, because what has changed in Walmart? Nothing, you know? They haven't changed their business models, they haven't changed anything. And
yeah, they were the change at some point. They were like the change.
They were
the new norm. They set up the new norm, you know, so to speak.
They did. The superstores. They set up the superstore like model, and they put discount clothing, and they put small supermarkets kind of out of business because of their designed supply chain. So that's why Walmart's kind of a weird one, because they had very good design in the beginning, and then they became this well-machined cog. So they showed supreme leadership, because that's where I was going with this, that leadership is a vision of the future and then getting people on board with it. So they did that. And then they established this new norm that really revolutionized stores, you know? Amazon and stuff might eventually take away, you know, what Walmart had, because it adds value in a different way, which is the one-stop shop at home. You don't have to go to that superstore. You'll still get great prices, and you'll get your product straight away. So that's the value that may take over or eliminate, not eliminate Walmart. I think Walmart has too much money right now to actually be eliminated.
My best guess for Walmart is they're going to copy what works from Amazon. They're going to copy from each other. And Amazon is also, I think, buying specific areas so people can go see the stuff they want to buy, and then go back to Amazon and buy it. So they're creating display and showcases. And I think there was a Walmart showcase supermarket where your cart would know who you were, and your wallet, your digital wallet, would be attached to that, you know, all your discounts and all the stuff there. So all you had to do was put the stuff in there and walk outside, and you'll be charged afterwards. And you pretty much were stepping over and killing the position of the attendee, the person who's in the checkout in the supermarkets. What do you call that?
The cashier?
Yeah. Cashier. They're pretty much eliminating the cashier position. I also wanted to say that I could see that with Facebook. I think Facebook is a well-oiled cog machine that has very little change. It just moved to a specific series of norms, which is design norms. You know, that's the biggest change recently in Facebook. Pretty much they're fairly conservative with the changes you have. You know, the news stream is having systemic, minimal algorithmic changes to keep you there. And there's politics in play now that are saying, well, how much can you do that, and how much you shouldn't do that. And something else that comes to mind when you're looking at these changes is let's see. There's I would say that if you go back to the three different kinds of innovation that we're talking about, I think it's a cycle. You know.
Yeah. I would argue the same.
You know, the new norm will demand tweaks, that will demand steps, that will demand disruption again, and this has been what's been happening, and almost in predictive decisions. What I wanted to say about leadership and creativity, which is something you probably explained better, was the ability to get a lot of people's brains to participate in a solution, not just one person.
Yeah.
And that had, I remember you said, for people, we had this podcast in Spanish about a year ago or 2 years
About
ago.
a year ago. Yeah.
So what I'm thinking about right now, if you could just go over that, and I think that's the end of this podcast. I just want to go through those.
Yeah. I mean, last time I brought them written down, but I'm pretty sure I can remember them.
Okay.
But no, I think one of the big things you're talking about right now, I believe that leadership starts with EQ, so with emotional intelligence, and it starts within. There's so many chains of thought in terms of leadership, but my argument here, or the one that I most buy into, is kind of like this. It's kind of like a four-dimensional model of leadership, and one of the four aspects is within, and that's that you can't really understand people unless you understand yourself. So once you know what you're good at, what you want, and what you believe, then you can start to see or understand that people have the same pillars. And they may be the same as yours, or they may be different. But a leader, their job is to notice that this is what I'm good at, and this is what this person's good at. So how can I help them achieve something? So a common goal that the leader kind of establishes with and onboards everyone. And then, like you were mentioning, get the right people in the right positions to go there. So maybe you're not even, as a leader, maybe you're not the most knowledgeable of the subject, though it's required that you have a certain level of knowledge, so that you can guide the path, or that you can inspire a shared vision of the future. So in that case, I think that's what you were getting at with sometimes you need to understand your team, understand their strengths, and then feed them. And that's a leadership followership balance too. As a leader, you also follow. You don't necessarily. So I would draw another image to I don't know. I think very visually.
Graphic.
So
it's fine.
So I would say a manager, a very good way to describe a manager is like a horse and buggy. A manager will lead the people from behind and through kind of like force. You're forcing them a little to go left, you're forcing them a little to go right. It might not be hard, it might not be bad, but it's through a direct manipulation of, this is what I want from you, this is what I expect. And then a leader, there's also all these drawings of a leader is the first one. He's or she is
he's the front. He's at the front of the battle. Yeah.
They are leading through example where they want to go. And so, but at the same time, if you think of a wolf pack, sometimes the leader, I don't know, there's this great image of like a wolf pack moving, and it's the strongest of the young strong men, I think, is in the front. Then is some older men surrounding the pregnant women and the children. And then it's the children, the women with their older kids. Then in the back is the alpha wolf or whatever, and the alpha female wolf. They're in the back leading from behind. And it's so that they don't leave anyone behind, and they see where they're going, and they entrust that the strong people that they've put in front are going to take them in the correct direction, right? So it's sharing that mantle of power and entrusting people with expectations. So you have expectations outlined, mothers protect your children, others protect the older ones, etc. So there are these clearly established roles and goals, Mm-hmm. And but at the same time, there's that trust and that knowledge of their skill sets, right? And then so you're moving together to an inspired vision of the future.
I agree. I think the leader has to be a leadership position might require strength of character or physical strength in some positions, a Viking leader.
Yeah.
It requires strategy as well. An emotional EQ, yeah, absolutely. Not just in being an easygoing guy who will make you feel better all the time, but also somebody who can set the right tone and confront somebody in just the right, that needs to, to have an uncomfortable conversation. A leader might also know when to do that. When it comes to creativity and leadership, and this is the way I've approached it when I've had to manage problems, it's asking for solutions. How do you think we should solve this, and how do you think we should solve this? I've found myself in jobs where if I talk to middle management and lower management, they know exactly what to do and to figure out. They have a really good idea what the big problems are. And then I look at the upper management right before the main boss, and the upper management is just trying to survive. They don't want to hear anything from lower management. They don't want to get in trouble with upper management, and they're just in this chaotic position because the technical positions know how to fix the problems, which is lower management. The top management knows exactly where they want to go and knows they can fire anybody who doesn't get there. So middle management is kind of stuck and afraid of innovation and afraid of exposing themselves. And I'm talking about a specific situation I was in.
No, it's okay.
That I think it's important to base yourself on experience. What I wanted to do in that position was innovate, was change roles, was because I was kind of set. I had to pretty much move the company in a certain direction as an external consultant, and it was impossible. I completely failed because there was this barrier of expectations from the upper echelons of the company who wanted the results but weren't willing to go through the change. They weren't willing to get there. So I eventually became the bearer of bad news for them, which was maybe my perspective should have been understanding that their concept of value was different. I was there to apply technologies and methodologies that I knew worked. And instead, I pretty much needed to be a yes man,
Yeah.
And that was it was great because I'm no longer there, and now I'm looking at another company which is very innovative, and I'm really happy about the change. But
That's good.
It goes back to leadership. It goes back to navigating and knowing. As a leader, which it is a privileged position. You have to be humble, and you have to listen, and you have to be able to construct with the best of everybody's knowledge a new path. And this is going to be more and more necessary.
Yeah.
I remember the rules you were talking about had to do with letting everybody speak, not criticizing people's ideas or people directly, but building on top of what they could do. It was kind of a creativity management process.
Yeah.
And then empowered people to be more creative and to go out on a limb and say something that might look stupid in strict companies, but in innovative companies, it would maybe give us that missing piece to make this new machine work, because of somebody else's idea and somebody else's perspective.
Yeah. I pulled it up while you were speaking, just because I feel it's really good and really landed.
Yeah,
this document that I have.
Years putting those terms together. So yeah, let's use them.
Yeah, since remember, if I told you, I think it's worth mentioning. My thesis was more about leadership. So this is synthesized from a bunch of information. But before that, I wanna say that what you were talking about is kind of another aspect of like this whole innovation designer or human-centered innovator that I'd like to call myself, or that is what my knowledge allows me to do, is one of the aspects of it is kind of that change management and that organizational design. So more innovative companies are actually organized in a much different way than what you described. Instead of siloed from the up down, they're kind of putting everything on their head, on its head. So, you're serving the customer as a person. So you are an entry-level person, you're serving the customer. Your leader is serving you. They're giving you the tools and the vision and the objectives, you to feed that customer, to serve the customer. Their leader should be serving them. And the CEO or whatever up there should be serving the company in its desire to feed the customers.
I've worked with those too, and it's amazing. I mean, I've had both experiences, and I completely agree. I've had super supportive CEOs almost saying, "Hey, do you need some coffee?" Because they're trying to, they're making the rounds and understanding how their company is working by getting a psychological, almost like an intuitive psychological profile on everybody, and trying to figure out what's their need so they can do, work for me better or work for the company better. So so there's two types of companies, and we should talk about that later. Leadership.
Yeah, leadership. So I think that the first aspect that we should talk about is a leader should be an example, should set the example. They should, like I said, look in and clarify their values and the company values, and then align the work that's done within that, either that business unit or that company, to be in line with those values, so that it feels right, and that you're, as a leader, being or setting the example for everyone else. That's the fundamental one, the first one.
Yeah.
Then the second one is what we were mentioning before. If you're leading something, you have to be leading somewhere. So you have to inspire a shared vision. Because if people are not on board of going in the same direction, you'll have conflict that's not productive. Because there's productive conflict and there's unproductive conflict. If you don't know where you're going, you're going to have unproductive conflict. So you have to, imagine a future state, and you have to appeal to other people through their values that this is where we want to go. The third part is what you were mentioning. You have to challenge the process. It worked until now, but that doesn't mean that it will always work. That doesn't mean that it's the best way to do it. So a leader will actively, at least, internally challenge the status quo. Maybe it is the correct way to do it, but you have to take risks, as a leader, and try to move forward, because steady state or stagnation is not good. You should either be optimizing your process or you should be innovating, one or the other. But just running a company the same way for years, or not a company, a country, anything, just leading in the same way forever, could potentially be led astray because something new, or new laws could challenge or disrupt what you've been doing, and you have to be able to adapt to that. The fourth one, is what we spoke about before, that you have to know who you're working with, so who your team is, and you have to get them to cooperate by letting them develop and by strengthening them, and then the last one is, I think it ties into the first piece of being the example. But to be an effective leader, you have to come from an emotional place. You have to encourage the heart. Someone has to be bought in. They have to have an emotional connection to being led by you. And that is in some ways can be fed by giving credit where it's due. If someone does something, don't take credit for it. You give the credit, and people and sell the people that work for you, quote unquote, as a leader, or who you serve as a leader. And you have to celebrate any wins so that the team or the space or the environment is good and healthy and will collaborate.
Yeah. It's nurturing. It's a lot to take in, really. I mean, it sounds super complicated. And then again, leadership is like playing basketball. You're not really thinking about the arch and the weight of the ball and the frequency of the dribbling. You're just doing it,
Yeah.
So it has to do with practice. And I think there's also something almost counterintuitive about leadership, because if you want to be a leader, you're going to fail at it.
Yes, definitely.
You want to solve problems. You want to help the little old lady cross the road. There's a debate it happens to me all the time, and sometimes I do it, sometimes I don't. I see somebody in trouble, and I stop the car and I help, or I tell myself, no, he's going to be fine. I'll just go because I'm in a hurry. And I think that when I stop and when I help, I'm being a leader. I'm just kind of overcoming my own comfort, and I'm doing something. And after I do that, I feel proud of myself and I feel good about what I did. But if I try to find another person to help on purpose, I suddenly stop being a leader, So it's puzzling that way.
I think.
It has to,
Sorry, no, go ahead, finish your idea.
It has to be authentic and genuine, and it almost obeys something higher than you. It requires you to understand the macro system you belong to
Your values, yes, the values.
Is it your values, or is it your social context? I mean, you can be a leader of dogs too.
But my argument would be that it has to align to, like you said, your social context, your beliefs, your system of life. And in the end, I think that can be boiled down to in a psychological term as, your core values and beliefs. So I don't know, you can correct me there. You're the psychologist here.
What if the leadership move requires you to go, maybe not go against your values, but accept somebody else's values?
Yeah, compromise as long as you can live with it. I believe that's part of being a defined individual, and that's what I was saying. Conflict can be good. Conflict can help you grow, and just because your values are your values doesn't mean they're always gonna be your core beliefs and values. They may evolve, and that takes place with what you were saying with that failing. I would not call it failing. I would say learning, right? Because if you fail, you only fail. But if there's an evolution to it, it's because you took a risk. And I wouldn't say you failed, but you learned a lesson from it, right? So because I mean that might just be like, I don't know. Maybe I'm being like using like neuro linguistic programming or whatever, just staying on the positive terms or whatever. But I think you can't call it a failure, because in the end you won and you learned from it, and maybe your values adjusted, maybe your value system adjusted.
Well, so, if you understood failure as such, as a lesson,
That's why it requires that feedback loop, that learning from and going back. I think leadership is really that, and that's why there's that whole in at least in my model of the leader, or the one that I believe in or aspire to, has that internal component to it. You can't just lead from the outside. You need to understand your inside, from an emotional space, from a belief space too, from a belief system, and you have to always be able to grow as a person, which will then in essence help you grow as a leader, and that's through learning, through a feedback cycle.
Well, you said that in that feedback cycle can go as deep as changing your values. right?
Yeah, it can. Yeah. That's, I believe, going back to the open-minded, the flexibility-ness of that I mentioned earlier of innovation, that's about change, not just, innovation in a company space or a business space or social space, but change in essence is being open to taking risks, is sorry, I'm blanking, but what we just said.
Well, here. I wanted to read something. I wanted to read something to you. This is something I'm writing, and then maybe
Flexible and
I'll share it
open-minded.
with
Sorry,
you.
that's what it is. Yeah, go ahead.
There you go. See, right now you're being flexible and open-minded because I'm kind of shifting. My intuition told me I should read this. So here I go. And please let me know how that, and maybe this could be a closing statement because, I told you it was going to be an hour. It's been an hour and 45 minutes already.
Yeah.
But humanity's a team. I'm reading this and it has to do with shifting values, which is at the core of what's happening right now. But humanity's a team and we need to grow up, okay, as a species. Humanity is becoming an adult. It's not there yet. These last few hundred years have been similar to growing pains, hormonal drives, growth spurts, and the general dazed and confused sense of being a teenager. In this respect, 2020 is quite the emotional and sombering episode. Like a teen driving drunk with all of his friends at imprudent speeds while listening to some rebellious, fast rhythmic music in a car they just rebuilt. Our challenges now are in the realm of maturity. As the geopolitical tantrums have taught us, nothing good comes from them except maybe lessons driven from the pain of our mistakes. What makes us human is our evolutionary strength. Curiosity did kill the cat, but only the last time the cat was curious. All evolutionary clues say that the cat must have been curious because it was the optimal genetic predisposition for cats to be curious. As a matter of fact, many animal psychologists coincide the curiosity to be a sign of intelligence. We also need to consider love as a viable systemic strength, preserved by evolution and improved through its cruel process of killing the weaker traits. So why do we love? And is love our best strategy? Love is a systemic optimum strategy for all individuals in an advanced, intelligent, and interdependent species such as humans. And that's where I'll stop. And maybe, but it is a change in values. I mean, love is a universal thing. Most cultures talk about it. Some really smart guy once told me when I asked him to define love, what is love? And he said, love redefines itself every time it exists. And then I looked at the position of a leader who's looking at what is the most important thing that I need to do for the group to move forward. And that action is redefined every time you ask the question. And it's also innovation through there. So that just, I thought I should share that. I don't know if
I think it's a great ending point. It's good. It mentions and challenges everything we've talked about. So I think it's a good spot to end it. Yeah.
It's an innovative. Cool. Well, thank you. Thank you for your time. I hope this is the first of many talks. I also would like to talk more about your thesis and maybe make a focus on that. I'm really curious about that. Maybe I could read it if you were comfortable sharing it.
Yeah, I have to. I honestly have to check. I worked with a consultancy in England, in the UK, to do that thesis, and part of the information was actually classified. They were working on something new, so not classified. Sorry, what's it called?
Confidential.
Confidential. Yes, sorry, confidential.
Okay. Cool.
So to a certain point, I can share. I think all my insights I can share. But I think their information I can't. But yes, I'll definitely, yeah.
Okay, well, Daniel Hernandez is a human-centered innovator, and he is a consultant. And you can ask me in the comments. If you want to reach out and maybe innovate your business or your company or your organization. Thank you, Danny, for
it's a pleasure.
My podcast.
Of course. Thank you. And whenever, I just meant to say I'd be open to speak whenever and about any topic, honestly, I think.
Yeah, I think we do have great conversations. Okay, well, please propose one. Okay.
All right.
Good night, man.
Good night.
I'm going to broadcast, and we can speak after that.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.